he called me aside and he said, that's the best advice that I ever got in my life. And he also acknowledged that he ought to have, etc., etc. Many times I visited that corner of when do you really say things when you have to? Because if you come from a very strong position of conviction, then it works. But when you look at all the niceties that go around and you start to do a little bit of balancing, then you don't come to a, then you're really negotiating with yourself. That's what I want to say.
You know, I think this is a bit of a very strange habit I have. Many times when I have to confront an issue, I write it. And the longest letter I have ever written to my boss is 24 pages, all self-typed, articulating issue after issue as to why and what needs to be done. That's my longest letter. And again, I'm thinking about it, it's not to my boss, my direct report, my COO in last month in October. I wrote an 11-page letter typed by me. I find that sometimes, and this is my little bit of self-awareness, that with my height and weight and with my kind of little bit of a natural aggressive personality, coupled with my inner courage, it comes across as too aggressive when I take a stance on a point of view. So I've decided a softer way of dealing with that is to just write out, you know, where you choose your emotions and words more carefully. Whereas you don't come across aggressive because sometimes your courage could be misplaced because you are driving a point of view which may not be the right one. You know, the other guy could be right, so, because there is always that inherent bias that you have. So I just want to hear tips and techniques that people have used. Anuranjit, anything else?
While of course agreeing to both of you, I think I can't agree more on all the points that you said. Sandip, we talked about it in corridor, in terms of how I believe, and of course we're experiencing that in our day-to-day interactions with the CEO. Trust is the kind of very solid bridge. But the CEO is required to be 2-3 notches up in every function, and that's why they are there. But in terms of what Nathan has said, let's say in terms of the tactics, because you always best in an organization while you have best of the intent in terms of the competencies, philosophies, but you have a mass there which is there for quite some time, and you have let's say kind of intelligent person with the philosophies, with the courage, convictions, and confidence. But if you are not able to make through that big mass in terms of what we are trying to say, because it's a big mass, you have to really push hard, correct? You get tired and frustrated. Yeah? And then again, with all that you said, correct, in terms of your enablers, you then decide, am I able to actually convince some of these people? And if not, should I stop? Or should I actually continue doing that? On your writing, while your face is seen on the letter that you are writing, unless you are very, very learned and tactical in writing, otherwise your writing can speak by itself, correct, your aggressiveness. So I go with Sandip saying that it's not about you having those natural competencies, but having to be able to articulate them in the given context of the people around you. And if it's a big organization, you really have to get that right. So that's my view.
Don't misunderstand me. I don't write always.
No, I'm just saying.
90% of the times I speak also. But I believe that sometimes when you display your courage, you automatically stimulate defenses in the other individual. Whereas when you write a point, that individual repeatedly goes back to reading it and starts reflecting, because in his private moment he doesn't have to create defenses in front of you. Particularly if it is a highly experienced manager of many years of standing. You don't want the person to feel small and then the issue goes and there are defenses and then you start arguing yes or no. So again, one of the skills perhaps, to the repertoire of skills that Sandip talked about, perhaps writing is one we should add to it. Actually.
Absolutely.
No, I couldn't agree with Santrupt more. I know I'm digressing a bit, but this is not about writing as a subject. But writing allows you also, sometimes you have conviction, which could be misplaced because your emotion takes over. But when you start writing it rationally and you tear up your paper a couple of times and you redraft it and you write it down, it also tests your conviction, your clarity of thought. And it also, in a sense, if you are adept at it, you can rationalize it correctly and put it across in a firm manner. There's another point I want to make, and I was reacting to what you were saying, is the fact that I have lived by this all my life, and I've had harsh consequences. But I think courage and conviction is one part. But when you join an organization, I have found that when I sometimes interview senior people, some of them, not all of them, and I don't know why not all of them, some of them spend a lot of time not so much on the business, but the culture and values that the company has and how we practice them. And they ask this to the senior most person. And a lot of senior people mouth them. If you find during the course of your work that your values are being consistently compromised, that's where you need to have the courage to walk away. Irrespective of what the environment is. And like somebody said to me the other day, a value, if it is not painful to implement, it's not a value. So I just wanted to say that on top of all of this, as individuals, whether CHRO, CEO, whatever it is, the real test comes when we turn away from minor skirmishes on values. You can't take a slight holiday from a value for 2 days on a subject or on a person. The consistent application is very important. And that's what defines trust. A lot of people, particularly in the HR function, do not display, and this is true of others also, do not display a consistency which can belie trust. Predictability is a good thing because you are consistent.
A lot has been said, and it resonates with me. I think a very relevant point mentioned by both of you is around the emotions. And I find when we are passionate about things, passion comes out of emotions, and sometimes that can be a very overpowering thing when you're trying to make a change or having a conversation with the CEO. So for me personally, having handled a few transformations with Citibank, keeping objective and keeping your head straight has been tremendously helpful. And some of my experience during the financial crisis, be it in New York or be it in London, you're dealing with very, very emotive issues. Leadership changes, which means the whole organization is going to go through a change, and you're almost anchoring that whole change process. So I think remaining objective, keeping your head on your shoulders, keeping the big picture in mind and where this is leading to, has usually helped me personally when I'm driving through some of these changes.
I couldn't agree with you more. I just was referring to even something like appraisals. Sometimes when you actually make a severe decision, you look at the track record of that person in the company, and he's actually been given sometimes even meritorious recommendations, and suddenly he's found to be, it's because somebody has gone soft. I have, with my own experience throughout my life, found that wherever I have been very harsh with people who have even been good in feedback, I have earned their respect, and they have become better people. And therefore, I think, irrespective of whatever you might do, sometimes it may not be worthwhile to win a battle with a CEO, provided your values are not compromised, because at the end of it, your consistency of your conviction and your courage will only lead to more respect. And I think that's a very valuable component for anybody.
So I would, I'm Piyush Upadhyaya here. So I would tend to agree with both of you. Another aspect that sometimes in addition to writing, what I have practiced, one of the mistakes that many times we as HR heads, what we do, is we become too attached with whatever views that we carry. We become too much passionate about our own views, about our own decisions, in what context that decision we take, and that is where...
In other words, you're saying we are highly opinionated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that is where this conflict starts happening with the CEOs or your business heads. what I have done in such situations at times is that no, one is that I have one has to proactively develop that, as you rightly said, that no CHRO, CFO, CEO are 3-4 people who have to be not only professionally attached but have to be personally attached as well if they have to drive a certain agenda in the organization. So if you have developed that kind of a relationship with your CEOs, at times it would be good to take him aside in an informal chat when you are meeting him in an informal environment over a coffee in the evening or somewhere else. Then you broach that subject that no, the reason that conflict that we had at that time was this, and why I was attached with that view is that these are the reasons. So at such times, CEOs tend to give a very, very open ear to your views, rather than because at that time they are at times you feel that there is some kind of an ego or some kind of their own urge to impose a certain view overpowers your decision.
You sometimes find that if a CHRO is very close to a CEO and hangs around a lot with him, the people at large start hesitating to communicate much with him. Do they fear that CHRO?
Sorry, I didn't.
If you find sometimes the CHRO is absolutely joined at the hip with the CEO and is always hanging around him, do you find that people at large start feeling a sense of awe and fear for the CHRO?
I don't think
contextual. It is like.
I think if people see that relationship actually being accessed to the CEO, so it's all about how CHRO is positioning that relationship. That's very important.
it's about fear. I think sometimes CHRO, in name of being too close to the CEO, unknowingly become mouthpiece of the CEO and lose that sense of objectivity.
Yes.
Then attached detachment is what is important for the CHRO. You are there, but you are not there. You stand apart and ask some questions.
Precisely why I raised this, because the balance is very important. We can start becoming absolutely
The other
bum chums with the CEO.
Yeah,
But
the other view can be that as an employee, if I tend to see my CHRO too much attached to CEO, so I also at times get a feeling at least my voices are going right up to the CEO as well.
like Santrupt said, another way to put it, if CHRO comes into a room and delivers a message and says, the CEO wants this to happen, he becomes a mouthpiece. And that's when some of his or her personal credibility erodes, and that has to be the balance. And as she rightly said, it's something that you've got to manage very clearly. Anyway, it's just a...
Say, when you want to communicate or cascade a communication, if let's say the zonal CEO says, I have been told to tell you this, then you lose that credibility as a leader. So that's not only for CHRO or the HR people, that's for every leader, I think, because you can't say this, correct? That means that's the first step that you're taking wrong. I think, as my friend is saying, I think there are experiences saying that, the CHRO has good chemistry with the CEO in a positive way. I think they also like it, saying that, then there is a chemistry, CHRO actually having, kind of a...
The year of...
Absolutely. But again, as you rightly said, there's a balance. Balance is the, kind of keyword.
We in HR always talk about having good relationship to be able to manage conflict, etc. I used to have a very senior colleague who is retired now. He used to always tell me, to be able to work with you, I don't have to be in love with you. He says, well, I have to do a job, I come and work, we agree, we disagree, we go. Why do I have to have a relationship with you of any kind to be able to have a professional conversation, So that's also a point of view. Some people do it extremely well. Okay, you were saying something.
I wanted to just ask that, do you think it was just a sheer coincidence that so many thought similar words in buckets when they were talking to us? Or was it more than just a coincidence? So, this left us very intrigued, and I'm telling you, I don't want to brush this topic under the carpet, and I'm not beating the dead horse, but was it just a sheer coincidence that so many of them thought of the same thing for this thing? So,
frankly, I'll tell you, if you had gone and instead of NHRD, Indian Marketing Federation, and asked about marketing people, perhaps you would have got also similar answer. Because you represented HR and asked about HR, they said that. But I think that reflects a kind of social struggle that we are having today is to say, do people have courage and conviction to stand up for what is right? Can they subordinate their personal interest to what is right? And if we are finding that crisis in politics and economics and government, in private enterprise and everywhere, then perhaps some of us, even though may have sold our soul or suppressed our soul, still when asked, unconsciously it comes that I need to have the courage, I need to have the conviction, I need to have the confidence, I need to have the character to be able to stand up for what is right and what is
I have a slightly different take on why it might have come from so many CEOs about HR.
Sure.
I think in HR, the expectation is that you don't stand for your own convictions, but you stand for the collective conviction as well. They don't expect that of the CFO or the Chief Marketing Officer. The brand conviction is what probably they will expect from the CMO. The functional, the financial conviction is what they. And here, when you're talking of HR, it's not therefore reflecting on the lack of courage or conviction of the HR person about his personal thoughts and bearing. But are they able to represent the collective to the CEO or anybody else? I think might be something that's driving this.
Harish, I can't remember who said it. Somebody said the opposite of courage is not cowardice, it is conformity. A dead fish also can go with the flow. So I think what we call as the mass or collective view that CHRO represents, even the CHRO needs courage to stand up against that so-called collective opinion or view sometimes, because he thinks, it is about again going to that authenticity of your conviction on a subject and your ability, whether it is majority, minority, single lone voice, are you able to connect with it and connect yourself and say, okay, what really is in the larger interest? So, there is never a final answer to it, as Anu was saying and Sandip was saying, we'll all have to find our own ways in the context and how to play. But the core question is, if 90 opportunities were presented where we had to stand up and display courage, did we take 20 or 60 or 70 items to stand up? That's the question. All of us do display occasionally, sometimes we read stories of bravery where the most unlikely person was extremely brave in the face of a